No, no, that's all. It's all good. Yeah, and thanks so much for joining us. Really excited today to hear about breaking into the marketing industry. This is a talk, a presentation that I've been looking forward to a lot. Yen recently, he a marketing analytics lead for device service and services at Google Pay, and just really looking forward to hearing sort of about his career path, things that college age students and people interested in marketing can do to sort of prepare themselves for a career, what skills they can learn, and what they should be focusing on. Um, Yen, thanks for joining from Singapore. Also, he also spends time at P&G working on consumer and market knowledge. And yeah, we're really excited to hear today. And with that said, we'll get into the presentation, and then we will, once that's through, we can go towards the Dory for Q&A, which I'll facilitate. And we'd love to hear sort of more about your career. So welcome, Yen. It's great to have you.
Cool. Thank you, James. Yeah, so before we get into this, I'll just do a quick intro of myself, my own background, and so that you can understand like where I'm coming from and how this whole thing was put together. So as James mentioned, I'm currently leading the marketing analytics for devices and services on the Google hardware products as well as Google Pay in APAC. Prior to this, I was in Procter and Gamble as what we call an in-house strategy consultant, where we look across the entire end-to-end sort of product life cycle, so all the way upstream from defining what the product should stand for, what kind of proposition should you have, down to defining, let's say, your go-to-market strategy. So things like where do you shelf the products, so how do you communicate to the consumers, what kind of channels do you use to reach them, and then down to let's say your day-to-day business management, so the entire life cycle. So the way this deck is structured is that we will look into, let's say, what kind of so first we'll start with what is marketing, better to like understanding what that is, and then what kind of skills are needed as a fresh grad or collegiate students to get into marketing. And then also quickly talk through like what are some of the roles that are commonly available in this industry and what kind of skills are needed for each one of them. Cool. I'll move into the proper deck then. And if you have any questions, like you can either stop me during the presentation, or I think at the end of that we would have like 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A, so you could do that as well. Cool. So what is marketing, right? So what we have here is an official definition from the American Marketing Association. So I'll not read through them. So reading through this, at least when I first came across this definition, it's not exactly clear what that is, right? So what I've learned from my almost, I think, 9 years in this industry is that so essentially you could break marketing down into two parts, right? The first part is really about understanding why people do what they do, right? So for and this is important not just at a very superficial level, but really get down to understanding like the more emotional, the more behavioral side of things, so that you could really give them what they want, right? So what we meant by that was, as we all know, marketing is all about creating a brand, right? So for example, this is an iconic one, right? So it's Coca-Cola. But what actually is a Coke? It is essentially sugar, water, and most importantly, a brand, right? And how do you create this brand is what marketing is really about. And the way to build a successful brand is by really understanding what people want, right? So, for example, you could have mixed your own soda at home, but you can never sell for the same price as Coke, right? Because Coke has successfully built a brand image around, let's say, things like happiness. This is something that you would grab when you're in a festive mood, right? So that is all what marketing is, branding and marketing is about. And it goes beyond just the functional benefit of, let's say, quenching thirst in this case. It goes beyond that. It goes down to more a deeper level, a more emotional level, where you really understand that people are looking not just for something to quench their thirst, but rather they are looking for something that could help them feel joyous, something to share with their friends, right? So that's what understanding what people want is really about. So how do you build a successful brand, right? So essentially, brands are products with reputation, right? Across the iconic brands, what we see consistently is that one, they're recognizable, right? So things like a swoosh, let's say if you Google golden arch, what shows up the most common is the golden arch from McDonald's, right? So these are something that's so iconic that it's sort of become a work on its own, right? So let's say this friendly old man here. It's difficult to do a raise of hands now, but I guess most people will know that who this is, right? So this is Colonel Sanders. And then this one again, iconic in the auto industry, Mercedes-Benz, right? So there are, like, the reason they're so iconic is that they're very choiceful and they're very consistent in how they bring this up, how they communicate to the consumers, right? So no matter where you go, you always see the same golden arch of McDonald's in whichever part of the world you are. Similarly, across all of Nike commercials, this Nike swoosh has always been a key feature, day in, day out, year in, year out, right? So this is how they're decided and be so choiceful in building something that's so iconic around a single asset. The other one is being distinctive, right? So how can you stand out from your competition? Again, this, like, the way to achieve that is by understanding what people want, right? So one example that I can show you here is, let's say, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this eyewear brand called Warby Parker. So let me see if I can share this here. Yeah, so this is a very famous eyewear brand. And the way they stood out from the crowd is that instead of telling people, let's say, this is how great their lenses are and whatnot, they decided to go the other route and show people how their glasses are made. Cool. In the interest of time, I will not play the entire video, but for those who are interested, you could just Google, or rather YouTube, sorry, like how glasses are made by Warby Parker. Right? So I think one thing that you'll find interesting is that, like, the way they approach like this commercial is not to show people how premium, how luxurious their materials are, or let's say this is why you should pay so much for this pair of glasses. Rather, they really they boil down the whole process of how glasses are made so that their end users can understand this is exactly what they're getting for. And this is why they should be paying that kind of price for a pair of Warby Parker glasses. Right? So I think this is one of the first, like, instance in this eyewear industry where a major consumer brand has taken this approach to advertise their glasses. Right. The other thing that I would like to touch upon on this building successful brand is that a successful brand also has to be, in a way, emotional and connecting to the consumers at a more deeper level, right? So it has to build some, like, it has to make the brand desirable. And one way to do that is by, again, connecting to the consumers at an emotional level. So again, next example I'm going to show is, and again, some of you might have seen this, is a very famous The Real Beauty Sketches by Dove. This campaign is more than 7 years ago, and you can see it has racked up close to 17 million views. And this is organic views on YouTube alone, and there are a lot of press coverage on this, right? So again, I'll run you through some snippets of the video before talking about, like, why this is so distinctive.
Again, could you make sure that you're sharing computer sound as well?
1 second, I thought I did that.
It's on Zoom when you click the share screen. You have to like tack the or check the share computer
Okay,
sound.
sorry.
No, all good.
I'm a forensic artist. Worked for the San Jose Police Department from 1995 to 2011.
I showed up to a place I'd never been, and there was a guy with a drafting board.
We couldn't see them, they couldn't see us.
Tell me about your hair.
I didn't know what he was doing, but then I could tell after several questions that he was drawing me.
Tell me about your chin.
It kind of protrudes a little bit, especially when I smile.
Your jaw.
My mom told me I had a big jaw.
What would be your most prominent feature?
Kind of have a fat, rounder face.
The older I've gotten, the more freckles I've gotten.
I would say I have a pretty big forehead.
Once I get a sketch, I say thank you very much, and then they leave. I don't see them.
All I had been told before the sketch was to get friendly with this other woman, Chloe.
Today I'm going to ask you some questions about a person you met earlier, and I'm going to ask you some general questions about their face.
She was thin, so you could see her cheekbones. And her chin, it was a nice, thin chin.
She had nice eyes. They lit up when she spoke.
Cute nose.
She had blue eyes, very nice blue eyes.
So here we are. This is the sketch that you helped me create, and that's a sketch that somebody described of you.
So yeah, that's...
Corey, right? And we should spend more time appreciating the things that we do like.
Cool. So yeah, so again, like the reason this is so distinctive and so desirable is that it connects to the end users at like a very like emotional level, because if you've seen any like usual shampoo commercial, it starts with, let's say, a beautiful lady with perfect hair that, in a way, that's how the industry has always approached like hair care, even beauty care, right? Showing how the end product could look like. But what this commercial has successfully done is to show people that it's not always that like fancy end package that really appeals to people, right? It is about who you are and what you can do to bring out the best in yourself, right? So that kind of insights have resulted in such a powerful narrative that almost everyone I know, like every female that I know who have seen the ad, like they all felt something when they saw the creative, right? So it is so successful that you do not even know that you're watching a Dove creative, that you will not be turned off by that at all. And you notice that the only time Dove shows up is at the very end of the campaign, the creative. But everyone that you ask, they can immediately recognize that I've seen the ad. It is an ad from Dove, and it stood out from every other commercial or creative that you will see around hair care at that time. So it was so powerful that consumers love it, right? So this is what a successful branding and marketing is about. And hopefully with this, I've gotten enough of attention to think about why marketing can be an interesting or exciting prospect for you. So next, I move into what kind of skills are needed to succeed in the industry. So there are the hard skills as well as the soft skills. So we start with the hard skills, right? So the skill number one is you should not hit numbers if you want to get into marketing, right? So let's say, so within a blink of an eye, which usually is like less than 1/3 of a second, this is how much data has been generated. Right? So there are more than 2,400 tweets They are being updated within the blink of an eye. At the same time, more than 250 pictures are uploaded to Instagram. There are 23,500 videos viewed on YouTube, and this many searches on Google, right? So all of this is just to show the scale of data that's been generated today by the consumers, right? So as you can imagine, it's such a rich depository of data. You need some form of like skills or knowledge, or at least you should not hate numbers for you to be able to look at this data, analyze them, and come up with something that is so powerful, right? So the next thing is then, so how, as a student, how can you acquire like this skill, right? I think the great thing about these analytical skills is that we all have a base layer to work from, right? It is our intuition, right? So we all know how to be our intuition, because intuition is just like a history of what you know, right? So when you see something, your intuition will tell you like whether it's right or wrong, like how to make sense of that. So that's the intuition, right? And hence, as a student, what you can do is to build this intuition is always ask questions and then be very structured in finding answers, right? What I meant by that was, I say, when you see something, so let's say to the earlier insight, right? So let's say, how does Dove know that female actually want to feel confident? They want to feel beautiful. So again, they look at different sort of like data points that they have. So let's say, what do people care about? What do people think of themselves? So there are all these other data points that they have. They start asking questions about them, right? So why do people think that they are, like, why do people in a way undervalue their own beauty? Is it lack of confidence? Is it like, let's say, they're trying to be nice, subtle, are they humble, whatever, right? So they ask different probing questions, and then they went out to, let's say, talk to different people, or let's say they look at the other sources of data that they have. So let's say what the people post online, social media, and the like. Right? So through this process, they came to the insight that, okay, like helping female feel confident is something that is so strong and powerful that it can be something the brand should stand for. Right? So that's how they came to that insight, right? So that's why one of the most important skills to succeed in my marketing industry, and in fact, I think in all industries, is that with this deluge of data that we have in today's world, you should not hit numbers. And one thing that is really crucial is you need to have a good understanding of statistics, right? You might not need a master's degree in statistics, but at the very least, you need to know, let's say, you need to grasp the simple and basic concepts like average, standard deviation, significance, all of those, so that when you look at this set of data, you have a framework, or let's say, how do you find answers within like this, like all of this data that's being generated, right? And the next key thing is test everything and assume nothing, right? So again, the famous study from Google is that everything down to the color or the font size or the font on the search bar has gone through an A/B test, right? So that is a kind of like power or the insights or the depth of insights that could have come from you having the inquisitive mind and then using statistics and numbers to help you put together a framework to make sense of the world. The next skill is that you have to be a good storyteller, right? Again, like as I've seen from that, if you're not a good storyteller, it is very difficult for you to convey such a strong and arousing message to your consumers, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is not just to tell people what your product or service is, right? It is all about understanding human emotions, motivations, and the psychology to be authentic and engaging, right? So that people will follow your lead, right? So for example, again, like the example I quoted earlier, Coke, right? Essentially, Coke is just soda, right? There's no difference between, let's say, Coke or Pepsi or some random off-the-shelf soda can that you can buy, right? But the reason Coke is different from this other brand is because they understood what the users want, right? So they give them what they want, so that users will follow their lead, like just like that. Like they will be so loyal to you that it is difficult for them to switch to other brands. But again, as a student, like what you could do to acquire this like storytelling skill is like there are different frameworks available out there. You could Google about that. But I think the two more commonly used one are like have a structure in how you build a story. Right? So let's say all of us have gone through like various like stories growing up, right? So they all good stories always start with once upon a time there are these characters A and B. And this is what they do every day. But one day something happened. And then because of that, the protagonist or antagonist did something differently. Until something changed as a result of that. Right. So this is a very good framework to help you like think about your own narrative. Right. So when you try to sell, when you try to create a message or narrative to talk to your consumers or talk to anyone essentially, this is something you can always practice, right? So let's say even your presentation or when you're trying to narrate something to let's say your friends or your family, try to have the discipline to go through this framework. And again, the way to improve is by doing it day in, day out, and seeing how people react to this so that you could fine tune your story along the way. And eventually you come to a point where you realize, okay, this is the right balance between where you should put emphasis on to hook people onto your story. Right. So the other framework that I like to use is what we call the CAR framework, which is starting with context, action, and then the result. Right? So this can be used in more formal settings. So let's say when you write a resume, for example, when you're trying to narrate, let's say this is what I've done, or let's say when you come across an interview question of let's say, tell me a moment where you're the proudest of, right? So start with the context of let's say how you landed in that situation, what you did within that context, and then as a result of what you did, what kind of achievement, what kind of changes have you brought upon. And so this is again like something that you could like train yourself and be disciplined in, let's say every form of presentation that you do, right? So always try to put certain framework around how you bring about your information so that when you need to use this skill, it comes as natural as can be. The next skill, important skill is visualization. So again, with the deluge of data, once you put them into Excel sheet, this is how it will look like, right? So columns of data, rows of data, right? So let's say in this case, there are more than 200 numbers here. How did you tell a story out of these numbers, right? So this is where visualization plays a role, right? And this is important because all of us are by nature very visual beings, right? So I've come across a study that states that like I think of your entire brain, like I think more than 30% of your neurons are wired to process visual stuff, right? Compared to only 3% for hearing. So that means that the most comfortable and the easiest way for us to process information is by seeing something. And hence, this is why visualization is so important, right? So for example, trying to make sense of like what you're going to tell from this table is almost impossible, right? Because there's so much to take in. But if let's say you could put it in a simpler form, so let's say putting them on a line chart, right? Put with some labels. Then suddenly it's a lot easier for people to grasp what they are supposed to take away from this great analysis that you have put together, right? So this is why visualization is so important. Having said that, there's also good and there's also bad visualization, right? So good visualization is something that is clear, that could guide the audience towards what you want to show them, right? So for example, in this case, this is about the year, and hence you can see the spikes and the label, right? So they do not label every single spike, right? Rather, they choose to label those that they want to draw the attention of the audience towards. A bad example of visualization is something like this, right? So where again you're transforming this table into something like this, but this is really kind of pointless because you're putting everything into this one, right? So you can say there are 6 different labels, 6 different 6 different like data types here, and then everything is being labeled. Again, there's so many numbers here that it is difficult for the audience to focus and for them to know what exactly they're trying to tell them. Right, so again, visualization is about fine balance between understanding what you want the users or the audience to take away from, and then finding a way to deliver that. Right, so the way to do this successfully is always to start with a summary of what you want the audience to take away. Right. One common mistake that we make is that we always start with, let's say, this is what I've done. Right, I've done analysis. So this is what I've done. I've looked at all of the 10 different data sources. I've analyzed the 10,000 rows of data, and this is what I found. Whereas a good visualization should always start from what you want people to take away from your presentation, your speech, or your 3-minute spiel or whatever it is, right? So that is where you start from. And then once you have that, then you identify the best way to help them understand the information, right? It can be through a chart, it can be a video, it can be a simple bar chart, line chart, time series, anything, but it has to start from the summary that you want people to take away. And the litmus test is by showing this to someone who has not seen the work before, right? It can be your friends, your partner, your parents, your grandparents, even better, right? Because if they could understand immediately upon seeing what you show them, that means you have succeeded in synthesizing the information to something that's digestible to people. And the next skill to have for if you want to get into this marketing industry is like to be a technologist, right? So this is an evolution of how many solutions / softwares that are out there that are available for people in the marketing industry, right? So it has gone from around 150 in 2011, more than 7,000 different solutions provided across the entire marketing type in 2018, right? So this might seem daunting for someone who is new, but well, tools are important. They matter far less than you would think, right? And what I meant by that was that among all of these 7,000, you could actually group them into, I think, 10 to 15 groups. Within that, to be honest, there is a difference between, let's say, solution A and solution B. But if you know what you want to achieve, they actually do not matter that much, right? So most of the basic stuff, the important ones are available in all of these solutions, right? So there's no point sweating over which one to pick, other than the ones that fit your working style the most. And hence, for you to succeed in this, like you really have to have a clear idea of what you want to achieve, right? So there are a few. So here I've listed down like a few like key technologies that will help you in like this industry. So there are things like advertising technology, ad tech, the very famous one, search engine optimization, social media, CRM, insights analytics, right? So one thing you can do now, if you're serious in like interested in getting into the marketing industry, is to pick one that interests you the most. And then there are a lot of free tools or free solutions out there that you can register and sign up for an account for you to practice, right? So, and then the way to think about how you could maximize your time and effort is to think about what you want to get out of this, right? So let's say for let's say SEO, think of, let's start with a problem, define an output, and then register for a tool, practice to see whether or not you could achieve the output that you have achieved, right? So that's the best way for you to pick up the skills. And it's also a very easy way for you to like show during your interview that to show the interviewer or the hiring manager that you are interested in this is what you have done, and as a result, this is what you have learned, so that they can see that you have taken an initiative to want to break into the industry, and they're more willing to give you a chance to proceed further in the interview. The next skill that's important is what we call commercial awareness or commercial savvy. So this is important because at the end of the day, marketing is not an academic function, right? It's not a silo function, right? It exists within the organization to help drive either the top line or revenue or your bottom line profit, right? So that's why it's important for you for a marketer to make sensible decisions that are beneficial to the business as a whole and not just as a particular function, right? So while there are fancy and savvy stuff that goes into, let's say, advertising awards, at the end of the day, each CEO or each CFO cares about the impact that it could bring to the business. And hence, having the right commercial awareness and savvy is important in helping you make the right decisions for the business. Right. So again, how to acquire them are first the most obvious one is obviously internship or extracurricular experience, right? What you need to be able to show the interviewer or the hiring manager is that through your experience, you are able to understand how different parts of the organization work, right? So, for example, what drives successful organization, right? So, let's say you've gone through an internship, you need to be able to demonstrate you understand what your competition, what makes your business or your organization different from this other competition, and then as a consumer or client, why should they pick your particular organization over your competition, right? So, being able to having the understanding of how things work and the ability to demonstrate them or illustrate them is a key part towards helping you understand how different parts of the organization work. The next one is by familiarizing yourself annual reports and news, right? So start with, let's say, a company that you like, right? Let's say if you're an iPhone fan, look at Apple. Let's say if you're a sneaker fan, maybe look at Nike or Adidas, right? Start with one of them. Look at the annual reports so that you can understand, let's say, income statement, profit losses, revenue, top line, bottom line, how different parts add up to the entire like financial statement, right? So again, like the reason it's important is because it will give you a good sense of, let's say, how businesses work, right? So let's say you can understand margins, for example. Let's say comparing Apple versus Samsung. Why does Apple have a much higher margin than Samsung, right? Or let's say comparing, let's say, Coke versus a private label soda brand. Again, why does Coke have such a healthy margin? So by looking at this number, like these different numbers, you get to a better sense of how business actually run and what kind of role does, I say, branding play in this whole process. And then let's say networking professionals and reading news, these are the obvious ones. So let's say get the point to, let's say, again, pick a certain a certain company or industry that you're interested in. Make it a point to follow their news. So that again, you could read, let's say, when they make certain changes to the organization, this is how, let's say, reporters or Wall Street or financial analysts react to the news, right? Reading through them, you have to understand again, like the cascading impact of certain choices or certain decisions that the businesses have made and how that translates into a chain of reactions through the organization. Cool. So these are the top 5 hard skills that I would say like something that would help a fresh grad stand out from other students in terms of like trying to get into like this industry, right? Now quickly go through the soft skills that are required to get into this industry. And what you will notice is that like these skills are not unique to marketing industry, to be honest, but rather it is really about how do you again build a brand for yourself as a good worker and a good problem solver. Right. Again, skill number 1 is be curious and be a keen listener, right? Again, this is important in the marketing industry because like what I said earlier, right? So if you break down the essence of marketing, it is about understanding why people do what they do, right? And hence you need to be open-minded and be very curious and try to listen and learn without any agenda, right? What I meant by that was like you're supposed, when you listen, you are listening to learn, right? Not listening to validate your own hypothesis or listen to be polite, right? One of the common mistakes that people make is that when they talk to people, instead of trying to understand what the other party is trying to say, they tend to go in with an agenda and then only pick up the parts that sort of conform to their views or to validate their own hypothesis, right? So as a result of that, you will see that people who do this, they do not really understand the other party, and they only get to a very superficial level of understanding, right? So what that means is that as a marketer, you will never understand the deep, underlying and powerful insights of like what makes people tick. And as a result of that, like the kind of like powerful brand messaging that you saw earlier would never come across, right? This is important because you will not only need to understand what the users want and give it to them, but it's also important when you work with your cross-functional partners, right? So let's say your sales, your finance, your supply chain, or your R&D folks. You work with them. Being a good listener will allow you to understand what matters to each one of them, right? And then as a result of that, you can then be a very effective co-worker by understanding where you fit into this organization and how you can make the whole team tick and move towards an aligned goal. The second important skill is critical thinking. And like this basically about how can you put together a system or a structure to help you think through problems and then come up with solutions, right? Because increasingly, a lot of the problems that we see are more and more ambiguous. And because of the nature of, let's say, the world that we live in today, a lot of them are unprecedented as well. So a lot of these problems are problems that, let's say, a more senior person might not have encountered in their 10 or 20 years in the industry. But you, as a fresh person, might encounter the first week in your job, right? So that's why this is such an important skill to have, right? So there are a few tips that I could share on how can you like build up these critical thinking skills. Again, related to the first point earlier. Always ask questions, right? And then importantly, do not feel shy to ask questions. So there's no stupid question to ask. And more importantly, always question the norms and the basic assumptions that people have, right? One example that like is like an analogy I can give is, let's say, people always talk about, let's say, like Newton, right? How he found gravity is when he observed like the apple falling on him, right? So he did not just accept the wisdom that apples should fall from the sky. Rather, he started questioning, why did apple fall from the sky, right? So it's a very basic, it's a norm that no one has bothered asking before, but he has a curiosity to question and then try to find out answers, right? So through this process, you could like, in a way, understand how things actually work, right? Again, similar to what I've mentioned earlier. If the key to this whole process is the ability to distill complex information down to a very simple kind of like statement or solution that you can explain to anyone, right? So that is when you have really done your homework in critical thinking that allows you to distill all of these different information into a very simple conclusion, right? The other one is be aware of your own mental processes or biases, right? Because again, different people, because of their background, they will have different biases in how they approach a problem or how they see the world. So as the saying goes, to a person with a hammer, everything is a nail, right? So you have to be very particularly aware of your own biases so that when you approach a problem, you go in with an open mind versus trying to sort of like put a boundary around the problem that you see within what you're familiar with, right? So if you do that, for problems that recur often, you might get away with that. But for new problems, more likely than not, you will not be able to find a solution if you are approaching the problem from what you're used to. And the next one that you could do is by when you approach a problem, again, one common mistake that people make is that, let's say, given 10,000 rows of data, to jump straight into it, right? Try to find mean, trying to do any kind of analysis that they can think of, right? But that is dangerous because, well, it might help you in like certain cases. Most of the time, it's going to be a huge waste of time, right? Because the data usually is not clean, so you will see conflicting signals from the data, right? So if you jump straight into the data, you might end up in a situation where you see different conclusions from different parts of the data, and hence it's difficult for you to come to a conclusion. Whereas a better way to approach that is by having your own self-hypothesis, right? So let's say this hypothesis is better illustrated in a binary form. So let's say you should be able to answer the hypothesis in a yes or no manner, right? So let's say the reason sales have gone down is because more people, like, let's say your competition is offering a deeper promotion than you. So that's something you could check and then answer with yes or no. Right? If yes, and you're satisfied with that answer, then you can close your analysis. If the answer is no, then you can then go down to another layer of like your hypothesis. Right? So let's say in this case, you can argue that the next hypothesis you have is because less people can remember your brand. Again, you can go find the data, check whether or not this is true, right? So having hypothesis will help you simplify, like, or rather make the problem more tractable, and then help you zoom into the right places to find the right data to answer the question or to answer the hypothesis that you had. And through this process of elimination, you could then systematically scan through the entire landscape of data that you have to find the solution that you need. The next one is essentially as simple as keep it simple, right? So again, like as a fresh grad, I think I was guilty of this as well myself, so that you tend to use jargons, right? So let's say I'm trying to explain a problem, you try to use like the fancy buzzwords, jargons. But what you see a lot of times is that, especially in interactions with senior stakeholders, no one values jargons at all. Right? Because everyone is so in a way busy with a lot of different things. What they want is a very simple and clear communication, right? So that it's easy for them to act on, right? So they want something that is digestible. In fact, one of the like best advice I've received is that if you could fit your conclusion or recommendation or analysis into a tweet length, that's the best, right? Because for this like decision makers, they see that immediately, they understand it. If they have questions, they'll ask you. If not, decisions can be made very fast, right? So again, that is the importance of being able to like think through a problem thoroughly, distilling the complex insights into something that's simple, and then being able to communicate that clearly, right? And one important thing to this whole thing is also is that it has to be data driven, right? So all of analysis that you've done so far should be boiled down to, let's say, 2 or 3 set of numbers that are really important and impactful, that anyone who see these numbers immediately know that, okay, this is why I should act on your analysis, and as a result of that, this is the kind of impact I can expect. And then the next one is you have to have the hunger and the humility to learn, right? So this industry is evolving very fast, and as you have seen from the earlier slide, right? So in terms of like the technology or the solutions that are available for people to use, it has gone up from less 150 to 7,000, right? In the matter of like 6 or 7 years, right? So things are always evolving, and hence it is very important for you to have the humility and the hunger to want to learn. And there are easy and very free ways to learn Xoogle nowadays, right? So there are a lot of like MOOCs that you can pick things up from. Let's say Coursera, EDX, Udacity, where you can pick up, let's say, analytics, business management, financial analysis, right? So all of these are available out there. So if you are keen to break into the industry, you can actually start now, pick up some of these courses, go through them at your leisure, so that at least by the end of it, even if you decide not to get into the industry, you would have picked up a new skill that will allow you to, let's say, build your own commercial savviness, build your commercial awareness that will give you the opportunity to hold to hold a proper conversation with in almost any industry that you'll be interested in, right? So that is a very important skill to have. Last one, again, collaboration. So no surprise. So one important thing is for you to be able to build and maintain trust, right? So a lot of the skills I talked earlier about, so let's say things like being able to communicate clearly, how can you, let's say, understand what different people want, how understand how you fit the organization. All of these are key towards building and maintaining trust, right? The other one is you have to be adaptable and open-minded. Again, in a team setting, it's important to be open-minded so that you can have a two-way interactions versus a one-way, like, kind of like dictation, right? Last one, the next one is like, again, it might be less relevant for people who are junior, but if you could show this, you could demonstrate this, I think, again, it will help you shine through very fast, right? So the ability to coordinate, organize, and then prioritize workload for different people in the team is, I would say, critical in the team setting, right? Because that will allow you to take the lead in helping define what people should do, helping define what the team as a whole can achieve. Right. Related to this is like the ability to, or the willingness as well, to embrace and initiate change, right? So if you could do that, then again, it shows leadership in you, and it is in a way easier for you to lead than to react to something, right? And then yeah, so these are the top 5 soft skills that are crucial into like in succeeding in the industry. And like I mentioned earlier, these are not unique to marketing industry, to be honest, but these are more important as a like helping you develop as a professional. And once you can demonstrate these skills, I think it's easy for you to get into any industry that you want. Last slide I have is like the kind of like common roles that are available within the marketing world. So again, I can break it down by like what are more analytical and more creative. So on the creative side, you have things like email marketing, content marketing, social media, event marketing, right? So these kind of roles require a lot of the more creative part because you need to craft a nice message. You need to be able to communicate clearly. And then this is like, those who play a big part of day-to-day role. Whereas on the other side, let's say things like SEO specialists and marketing analytics. This is where analytics is like your day job, essentially, right? Having said that, as you have seen, right, the examples that we have gone through earlier, to be a good marketer, you eventually have to have the right balance between the two of, let's say, analytics and creativity, right? The difference is really how much of that you do in a day-to-day, right? So even in, let's say, the creative side of things, let's say social media, content marketing, after crafting, let's say, 10 different campaigns, eventually you will still need to understand which one of them work, which one of them did not work, right? So that is still analytics. It's just that the bulk of the time will be spent on crafting the message, less so on analytics, vice versa. For this side of things, most of the time is being spent on, let's say, analytics, less time on the communication and the creative part. But they're not mutually exclusive. To be a good marketer, you need to have a balance of the two, right? And hence, you see that at the top and the bottom here, there are like 2 roles that are really important in the sense that these are the roles that are less like I would say specific, like this kind of like very hardcore specific skills that you acquire. Rather, these are the like more general manager kind of like role, right? So let's say brand marketing or in a startup growth hacking, right? So these 2 kind of roles require a very delicate balance across the 2 side of things because they will lead the vision for the team, and they will help set the organization to a success by using marketing to help the organization scale up fast. So in the large organizations, they're called brand of brand marketing. In a startup, they're usually known as growth hacking or growth marketing. Right? So these are the common roles that are available within the industry and the kind of skills that are required to succeed in this role. So with that, I'll end my presentation and open the floor to questions in case you have any.
Wow, thank you so much. And that was a really, really, really helpful presentation to someone who's personally like interested in marketing, has been in a few marketing internships, but like it's such a broad field. I think you did a really good job of sort of narrowing it down and helping me see the different paths that I can take and how to prepare for those paths. I took a few screenshots along the way because I wanted to make sure that I had sort of your breakdowns handy. And yeah, so I think a lot of our students in marketing who are interested really appreciated this. And I have a couple questions that are coming in here that I'd love to ask you. But thank you for preparing this. It's been really helpful.
Sure. Yeah, fire away. Question.
Awesome. So my first question here is, how can college students improve their you're talking about like storytelling skills. So if they're at a role where they're you know, entry level roles are less you have less agency, and you have, so how can college students sort of improve their storytelling skills while they may not be in like a role where they're making those direct decisions for what a brand is doing? Like, how can they develop those skills in their first positions?
Yeah, great question. So it might seem like an impossible task initially, right? But if you think about it, everything that you do, even at like that kind of role, essentially, what you do is you're trying to sell something. You're trying to sell analysis, trying to sell a recommendation to someone. Right? All of these are opportunities for you to build that skill, right? So like what I mentioned earlier. So you can take a discipline of, let's say, every day when you meet someone, have the discipline to force yourself to like structure what you want to tell them in that kind of narrative, in that kind of framework, right? So let's say if someone were to ask you, how's your day? What have you done today? Try to fit your narrative into like that structure. It is not easy. It takes a lot of like conscious effort. But what I'm trying to say is that you can be very conscious about like different opportunities that come out, right? So at the end of the day, we're all trying to build a brand even for ourselves as well, right? So if you think about it, so let's say who you want to portray yourself as to your colleagues, to your friends, to your families. All of these are different opportunities for you to tell a narrative, and hence those are opportunities for you to, in a way, practice. But what it takes is, I'm not going to lie, it's not easy. It takes a lot of conscious effort, but the opportunities are always there. You just have to find that and then force yourself to have the discipline to stick with that. If you can do it consistently for, let's say, a period of like 2 or 3 months, you would have seen a huge improvement in how you do it, right? The other tip that I've gotten is that for every analysis that you do, always try to have a 3-minute spill ready or 15 seconds spill ready, sorry. Let's say if you get into an elevator, let's say your general manager or whoever it is, can you sell him the idea in the 15-second elevator ride? Again, that kind of like situation will force you to distill whatever that you learn into a very simple framework that you can tell someone within 15 seconds. This is what I've done. This is why you should listen to me.
Yeah, no, I think that's, yeah, distilling is the hard part, right? So like I definitely understand that like you can analyze it, but I mean we were as a group sort of practicing elevator pitches for the Xoogler School, and it's really hard to distill what you want to say about yourself, about your abilities into like a 45 to 60 seconds. So yeah, I completely agree that practicing that skill and honing it is huge. I would follow up and say, you sort of say you're practicing like you're practicing storytelling, but just like by sort of your identity. Would you say you can sort of even practice that storytelling like through your professional like social media, through your like your Twitter, your LinkedIn, and like like having a narrative and sort of making sure that people expect a certain narrative from you on those platforms? Is that something that you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. Like one
Okay.
example I gave there was actually the car framework, right? So like that's how, like at least in the industry, that's how usually you will write your resume or performance review, right? Start with the context, action, and results. Again, you can take the same framework to, let's say, when you write a tweet or LinkedIn post or share something on Facebook. This is what I've done today. This is why I'm great, for example. Start with the context. This is what happened. This is what I did. And as a result of that, this is the
Mhm.
kind of change that I've brought to the team or organization.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I will, I'm going to follow up with one final question, which is on your personal experience as someone who's sort of is now a veteran in the marketing industry. What lessons did you learn early on in your career that you could share with like college age students that are pursuing a career like yours? What are things that you might have, like you could go back and say, I wish I had known this, or it's helpful to know this when you're first getting into the industry?
Great question. And actually, I think you touched upon that. At least for me personally, I think one thing that I've learned is that like the importance of storytelling, right? Because for me, I'm more of an analytical person. So when I first got into the industry, let's say if I get analysis or a project, I tend to spend 90% of the time on the analysis, 10% of the time on the putting together deck to do that. What you realize is that with that approach, you end up in a situation where you're telling people, this is what I've done. But as let's say someone who's senior, who let's say your general manager, honestly they do not care about what you've done. All they care about is what they should do because of what you've done. Right. But because you spend so much time on the analysis part, like very little time in thinking about what that means to the business, you end up not achieving that goal at all. Right. So one thing that evolved over time is, let's say when you get analysis, always make sure that you have at least 30% of the time or more, depending on how comfortable you are with that, time set aside for one, displaying the insights. And second, importantly, work through with people who are like part of the team to understand what kind of impact this will bring to them, what kind of help you need from them to push this through. So at the end of the day, when you present this to, let's say, the decision maker, it is very easier because once you've taken into account the inputs of everyone, in that meeting itself, no one is going, like you get a lot of allies right behind you, right? Because you have taken all of their inputs. They know how this will impact them. They have seen what you have shared with them, and then they can all stand behind you. So at least it's a lot easier for your hard work to now being put into action, right? So I think that part was overlooked, and this is something that the school will never teach us, right? But that kind of like, in a way, first distilling insights for sure, and then in a way consensus building. I want to say influence, yeah, influencing, spending the time to influence and influence not just for self-influencing, but to understand what people are doing. And again, this way, listening is important, right? So you need to listen to understand actually what are their objectives, right? So what is in it for them? So what you can do, what you would do can fit into what they need to deliver as, let's say, they're in their respective function. So it's a lot easier for to influence them. Right? So a lot of these are like subtle, soft skills kind of like work that again the school never teach you, but this is something that I wish I've picked up earlier on. And again, it's not easy. As a junior person, it can seem very daunting as well, trying to do this. Right. So it's always natural to start with, let's say, spending most of the time working in silo, burying yourself, your head in the ground, trying to get through things. But it's important for you to be mindful of the importance of like distilling the insights and then spending a lot of time to influence to make sure that whatever that you do meets the goal or objective of the business as a whole, so that it is something that can be actioned upon later on.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's so easy. I think everyone has that experience early on at a job where you just feel like you said, like your head's in the sand. You're just driving forward and you're not really sure where you fit in. into the bigger picture and you're not really listening. You're just kind of just doing something, that you're not really sure even where it's going. So I think that's a really fantastic point. Just be cognizant of everything, be listening. That's really helpful advice. With that, we went over a little bit, but Yan, thank you so much for this hour with Xoogler School and for the presentation. Really, really helpful. Really great to see the way that you broke it down. Someone who has a lot of experience in the field, hearing a little bit about your career has been super helpful. And I think this is a clarifying presentation for students that may be like a little bit unsure of where they want to go in the marketing world. So really appreciate it. Thank you for staying up a little bit late in Singapore. It's been really, really helpful.
Cool, no worries. And I think you have my contact as well, so in case anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk or chat over email.
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah, enjoy the weekend. Thanks so much, and thank you for everyone who's tuning in on YouTube. I will share like our schedule for the rest of today, which is we have a Q&A or a conversation with Grace Wu, who's a tech recruiter, coming up on breaking down common sort of misconceptions in the recruiting world. And then we will have our schedule up on our website for the rest of the week. But thank you all for joining, and Yen, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and everyone have a great Friday. Goodbye.
Take care. Bye. Nice weekend.
Bye.
Bye.